Hello, I'm John McCormick, McCormick Farm, Portage, Pennsylvania. Um, this farm's a fifth generation farm. Uh, the first McCormick settled here in 1844, and they cleared the land, started raising corn, potatoes. They came from Ireland, so they grew a lot of potatoes in the history. Uh, when I was 8 years old, uh, my brother lived on a farm at that time, and we was in town about 5 miles away. And about 8 years old, I had a little pedal bike, and I used to ride up to the farm, and I knew what needed to be done. I'd jump on the tractor, and I'd plow, or I'd harrow a field, or I never did any planting at that age, but I would work the ground or do stuff that needed to be done. Then I'd go back home. My dad was at work, and like I said, I just rode my pedal bike up here and would do things. And I really like fell in love with the farm and doing things. And then when I got out of high school, I started to run the farm as my own, and I leased some other land. And I was doing what you'd call conventional farming from what I do now. We planted corn, grain, hay, oats, and we fed the cattle a lot of hay, a lot of grain, and we left the cows in the barn, hauled the feed to the cows, hauled all the manure back out. And I did that for about 20 years. And then in 2004, I had a diagnosis. Well, it was actually 98. That was the second time I had cancer. I had it when I was younger one time. And then I just started asking questions about the farm. And I decided that I needed to do something a little different. So I wanted to get away from fertilizers, chemicals, and inputs. So I just fenced the whole farm and converted everything over to grass-based farming. And with the exceptions of an acre or two of corn that we grow for chickens, we grow that organically, no fertilizers, no chemicals. Just a little bit of corn for the supplement the chickens so we don't buy as much. But basically everything is grass. So in 2004, when I started to fence the farm, I was looking into what type of cattle that we should start with. And I ran into Gerald Fry, and he talked highly of the Red Devon cattle, and researched a little bit of the Red Devon cattle, and they do really superb on grass. They don't work real well on a grain system. They tend to get too fat too quick on grain. The Red Devon came to America in 1623, some say 1624. There was a discrepancy in the calendar, and they came over on the second ship to America in right around 1624. So that was one of the first herds of cattle that came to America, and very well suited to grass. The genes are fairly pure, and they will produce consistent beef from one animal to the next. A lot of the other breeds of cattle, there's 10-15% of the Angus, the Herefords, are real high quality cattle, but the consistency on some of the breeds, they outcrossed them, they crossbred them too much, and they don't have the consistency. And then they had the animals that are so big. The Devon's a smaller animal. It fattens a little quicker on grass. It's a low maintenance, has a high back fat, so it stays cool in the summer, warmer in the winter. Very docile animal. And we bought some embryos off of Gerald Fry and put embryos in Angus cattle, and even till today we have some 7/8 Devon cows with they're only 1/8 Angus, and they're actually still black. But we've been using nothing but pure Devon bulls since 2004. Okay, we raise all our cattle want 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. And what is grass-fed, grass-finished, and the sustainability of grass-based farming? I always go back to what the buffalo did in the Great Plains. The buffalo would start across the plains and they would eat grass, and they would take a step and they take a bite, they take a step, and where they were today, they weren't there tomorrow. They just went in one direction across them fields, and they didn't come back to where they were. It may have been months and months later. They didn't always get the perfect grass. They got over mature grass, they got younger grass. They kept moving. And what we do on the farm is sometimes we move the cattle twice a day, and if we go away we might move them 2 days, 3 days, but generally we move the cattle every day. There's no exact formula to what you have to do or what will work. The big thing is to move the cattle. The cattle will eat. Tomorrow they're in a different spot, and as the season goes on, the grass gets bigger and we just tramp more grass down, and tramping grass down increases the organic matter and the fertility of the soil. We've been grass farming since 2004. We have not put any fertilizer on. We have not put any seed on. We haven't used very little fuel. I don't clip the pastures. By keeping the cattle in a small area for one day, they will tramp down a lot of the excess high grass, and eventually it will decompose and build soil. By tramping grass and putting manure on it, that's what breaks down that organic matter and increases the fertility. We have done some soil tests here. When we started, we had 3% organic matter, and after 6 to 8 years of grazing, our organic matter is up to 8%. 1% of organic matter will hold an inch of water, so we can hold 4 or 5 inches of rain right in the soil without any runoff. That would improve on flooding. If you would take the Midwest and all the farms had a high organic matter, the Mississippi River probably would contain all the water that would run into it. It wouldn't be flooding. The fuel usage, especially today, the fuel is so high price, and if you just think about it, why would you want to make hay, haul the hay to a barn, feed a cow in the barn, haul the manure back out in the field? The cattle can just move right across the farm with virtually just a little bit of temporary fencing between the paddocks, and it's just totally sustainable. It's good for the environment, it's good for the animals, and it's good, clean, healthy beef. I don't see any way that we'd want to do it other than grass-based farming. Okay, in additional to the grass-fed cattle, we run some pasture egg layer chickens. Chickens can't go out and navigate grass that's 2-3 feet high, but if you run the cattle across the land and you run the chickens behind the cows, the chickens can scratch. It can scratch the manure pies. They can pick all the little fly larvae out of the manure pies, and that actually will help the fly cycle for the cattle. Chickens will eat ticks. They eat a lot of bugs, and they're just really important for the ecosystem to keep everything in balance and check. We run a few meat chickens behind the cows. A 10 by 12 pen with meat chickens in it will put down approximately 300 pounds of nitrogen with one trip across an acre or field. We could raise 1,000 meat birds per acre on a farm. So if we had 10 acres, we could raise 10,000 meat birds. And it's completely sanitized, no ammonia, like raising them in a confined area. They're outside. So the potential with chickens is just, it's phenomenal. The amount of chickens that you could raise. Like buffalo herds graze, because where the herds of animals were that the birds followed, that's what happened in nature. Out in the Midwest, you know, when herds of animals grazed across the plains, the birds followed, because it was just part of the ecosystem. So I tell people, we're going to address that question about pink eye. Somebody said about tall grass.
Oh yeah, I got to do that.
Yeah. If you ask 98% of the vets about pink eye, they'll tell you to mow your grass short, to graze it. I'm a grass farmer. Why do I want to mow my grass? That's not my answer. But almost every vet will tell you that. But they'll tell you kill every fly, use insecticide and get rid of all the flies. Well, let's not. And then one vet told me minerals. Get your minerals right and you're balancing the soil, and chickens or the flies under control, but dung beetles and manure, you don't have a pink eye issue. Ian Mitchell said to take every negative that you have on a farm and turn it into a positive, or find a way to make it a positive. It's just like this, the garden and the produce, you know, in where the corn and that, but like even in the garden, see, we can put animals on that ground, put the manure on, fertilize it, and then we could plow and plant vegetables. Now plowing goes backwards because you're burning up carbon, but using animals for your fertilizer, you don't need to buy outside fertilizer. And on anything that's out on pasture, grass fed, or has access to grass, chickens, cattle, meat chickens, eggs, the egg yolks are bright yellow, have a lot of rich flavor. The meat chickens have a lot of flavor. The variety in the diet just makes the flavor. You can't comprehend it until you tried it. So if I had to say why grass-fed, it's low stress, low inputs. We duplicate nature with animals, and I mean, it just simply works. In addition to grass-based farming and raising cattle, we got into the maple syrup business 3 years ago. First year we had 220 taps, and then we went to 400 the next year. Last year we had about 900 taps. A lot of our timber is younger, so eventually 10 years from now we're hoping to be up 5,000–6,000 trees tapped. You get about a quart of syrup, a little over a quart of syrup per tree. So of course, the more trees we tap, the more syrup we're going to get. And what we do every day when we cook, we fill a little sample bottle up, and some of this syrup we keg it in stainless steel kegs, and we'll take a sample bottle that day, put the date on it. The early syrup is light, the later syrup is darker, but then that way we know what we have in the keg. We collect our sap, we pump it up from the creek with a well pump through a line up to a tank, and we run it through an RO. It goes up into the tank up on top, they're concentrated sap, and then we run it over into the evaporator. We can take 600 gallons of sap down to 150 gallon with the RO in 1 hour, and we cook about 80 gallon of water an hour. So that in itself, 1 hour in the RO will save us 5 hours of cooking with the evaporator. And we cook it through, we run it through the filter press, and we keg it up. And the interesting thing about syrup is when you get out of bed in the morning, you don't know if you're making syrup that day or not. You have a surprise in the afternoon. If it gets 40–45 degrees, we're going to be making syrup that night. If it stays cold, there won't be no syrup.
I just wanted to take a minute also and show our beehives. We added the honeybees to our farm this year. Okay, so this little device here is called the smoker, and we use this when we first open up the hive and then when we're getting ready to close the hive. The smoke actually calms the bees a little bit, so they stay and go down into the hive, so we're not, when we're putting the different pieces back on, not having them all up in here, getting them smashed or having them sting us. So you just gently go over them. And for the most part, then the majority of them will go down below, and that just allows us to put the rest of the hive back together.
So we had heard of McCormick Farms actually through Harvest Host. We really enjoy using the Harvest Host because it allows us to come to different farms, breweries, cideries, vineyards, things of all sort, and to be able to spend time with the farmers, be in the environment. It's just such a wonderful way to get away very easily. And with Harvest Host, you basically bring your own rig, self-contained, and can just step right onto the farm. So it's actually a pretty terrific experience.